Welcome to Saturday with little Mistalina here, my little cuddle silicone fairy. She's so delightful. She's just resting today and floating in her fairy outfit. Isn't she just so beautiful? So while Mistalina is dreaming, I thought we might have a little story time. So the story I've chosen is Thumbelina. There was a woman who very much wanted a child. She went and asked an old witch where to find one. "Why, that's easy," replied the witch. "Take the seed and plant it, and see what you shall see." And the woman thanked the witch and planted the seed in a flower pot, and it sprouted and grew into a tall flower bud. What do you think about that, Miss Lena? So, let's see what happens next in our story. And when the flower burst open, sitting in the green cushion was a pretty little girl. And she was no taller than your thumb. So the woman called her Thumbelina. The woman created a bed for her out of a polished walnut shell, violets, and a rose petal, and Thumbelina played along. Flowers arranged on a plate of water. She had a tulip petal boat with a pair of white horsehairs for oars, and she rowed and sang with a soft, sweet voice. One night, an ugly, slimy toad, looking for a wife for her ugly, slimy son, hopped in through a broken window, and she seized the bed that had Thumbelina sleeping in it, taking it to her muddy marsh on the bank of a stream. "Don't wake her," the old mother toad said to her son toad. "We will put her on the broad water lily pad in the stream so she can't run off. Then we can decorate a mud house for the two of you to live in." When Thumbelina woke up the next morning, she saw where she was, and she began to cry. And the toad swam to her lily pad island, and the mother toad curtsied deep into the water. "Meet my son," she said. "He is to be your husband, and you will be a delightfully muddy home." And Thumbelina cried still more. She didn't want to marry a toad. The little fishes swimming beneath the lily pad heard the mother toad, and they popped their heads up to look at the stranded girl, and felt sad. So lovely should be made to live with a slimy toad. The fish gnawed at the green stem and the floating lily pad and cut away, and away it went, pulled into the stream's current, and away went Thumbelina. So Thumbelina began to travel, and she was happy, floating along, enjoying the sunlight on the water. A white butterfly fluttered round and landed on the lily pad, and Thumbelina undid her sash and tied one end of it to the butterfly and the other end to the lily pad, so it went much faster. But then a big Maybug caught sight of her, and he fastened his claws around her waist and flew up with her to a tree, and the lily pad and the butterfly were carried away downstream. Thumbelina was frightened up in the tree with the Maybug, but she was even more sorry for the nice white butterfly, and hoped that he could free himself from the lily pad. The Maybug didn't care. He fed Thumbelina nectar from the flowers, and told her she was quite pretty, even though she didn't look like a Maybug. And after a while, all of the other Maybugs came to visit They stared at Thumbelina. Why, she only has 2 legs. What a miserable sight. She hasn't any feelers. She's narrow at the waist. How awful. She looks like a human child. How hideous that she is so small. And the Maybug, who had flown away with Thumbelina, knew that she was pretty, but nodded and agreed with the others, declaring he wouldn't have anything to do with her. They left her on the daisy. All summer long, Thumbelina lived alone. She wove a hammock in the grass and hung it under a big burdock leaf to keep off the rain. She ate nectar and drank dew. Summer and autumn went by, but when winter came, Thumbelina was very, very cold. The birds flew away, and the big burdock leaf shriveled up, and every time a snowflake struck her, it was like a whole shovelful landing on one of us because she was so small and it was so cold. Lost in the large field where the grain had been harvested months before, cold and hungry, Thumbelina found the door of a field mouse's hole and begged for a bit of barley. "Oh, you poor dear, come in and share my dinner." With the field mouse, who was a kind-hearted creature with a cozy home and a storeroom full of grain. So the field mouse liked Thumbelina so much that she invited her to stay, saying, "You can do the tidying and tell me stories." And Thumbelina was happy to be warm and well fed. "Soon my neighbor, the mole, will visit," said the field mouse. "One day. He is very wealthy. His rooms are larger than mine, and he wears a black velvet coat. And if you marry him, you will always be warm and comfortable." Thumbelina didn't like the sound of this, and the mole dug a long tunnel from his home and invited the field mouse and Thumbelina to see it through, though they warned them that this was a dead bird lying there. Sure enough, in the tunnel lay a swallow, his lovely wings folded, and Thumbelina felt sorry for him. She loved all the birds of the summer, but the mole gave the body a kick with a sort of a stump, saying, "He won't chirp any more. He's a wretched bird. He has nothing but his chirp, chirp, and must starve to death when winter comes along." "Well, yes, you are right, sensible mole," the field mice agreed. What good is chirping in the winter time when you need food and warmth? And when you need food and warmth, when the others turned away, Thumbelina bent over to smooth the bird's feather, and that night she wove a blanket out of hay and spread it over the dead swallow so that he would lie warm on the cold earth. "Goodbye, pretty bird," she said, and she laid her head on his breast and started to feel a soft thump began beating inside. It was the bird's heart. And he was not dead. He was only numb with cold, and now he's been warmed, and he came back to life. He came back to life. Oh my goodness, Thumbelina was frightened because the bird was so much bigger than her. She gathered her courage, tucked the thistle down around the poor creature, and brought his mint leaf to cover her own bed to put under his head. And the following night she brought him in the petal of a flower, and the swallow woke up and drank and told her he had hurt one of his wings on a thorn bush, so she couldn't fly as fast as the other swallows when they took off. And for the warm countries far away, finally he had to drop to the ground. That was all that he could remember, and the swallow stayed in the tunnel through winter. Thumbelina looked after him. She didn't tell the field mouse and the mole because she didn't like the poor swallow. And as soon as the warm weather grew, the swallow said it was time for him to go, and Thumbelina helped him make a hole in the tunnel ceiling, and the splendid sun shone on them both, and he asked Thumbelina to come, but she knew the field mouse would be offended, so she said no. "Farewell, my good and pretty girl," said the swallow, following into the sunshine. There is Thumbelina watching from behind. Thumbelina began became quite downcast, and the grain in the field grew so tall that it was like dense forest. And the field mouse said, Thumbelina should spend the summer days sewing. You must find bedding ready when you become the mole's wife, she said. She hired 4 spiders to spin and weave, and the mole visited every evening and loved remaking the summer was nearly and loved remarking that the summer was nearly over and that he would marry Thumbelina. But Thumbelina didn't want to marry the mole. Every morning and every evening she would slip out the door to catch a glimpse of the blue sky with the breeze blew grain. Every morning. And when the autumn arrived, the grain was harvested, leaving short, dry stubble, and the field mouse declared that the bedding was ready so Thumbelina could marry the mole. Thumbelina went and said wept and said that she would not marry the mole. Fiddlesticks, said the mouse. Why, the king himself doesn't have a black coat as fine as his. His kitchen and cellar are wonderfully full. Be thankful. And on the wedding day, the mole arrived to take Thumbelina to his house deep underground. Farewell, bright sun, she called sadly. If you see my dear swallow, please give him my love. Chirp, chirp. And the swallow was there. She told him how she hated having to marry the mole and to live in the ground. Come with me, said the swallow. You saved my life, and I will take you to where it is always summer. Away they're flying. Thumbelina just jumped on the swallow's back, warm in the feathers, and off they flew. They soared over countries where oranges and lemons grew in the trees until under the green trees on the shore of a blue lake they came to an ancient place of dazzling white marble at the top of the lofty pillars. Many swallows had their nests. This is my home, said Thumbelina's swallow. Choose one of the flowers to live in. Thumbelina said she would have a glorious white rose, and the swallow flew down and put Thumbelina on the petal. She was ever so surprised to find a little man in her flower. He was shining, transparent, like glass, and he was the same size as Thumbelina, and he wore a gold crown and had a shining wings. He was the king of the flower people, and the tiny king thought Thumbelina was the loveliest girl he had ever laid eyes on. He asked her name, and then asked her to marry him and become queen of all of the flowers. She was very, very different from the slimy toad's son, and the Maybug and the mole, and Thumbelina said yes. And the king gave Thumbelina a crown. And then out from every flower top, ladies and gentlemen bringing presents with gifts of awe, with a pair of wings that had belonged to the silver fly. With this fastened to her back, Thumbelina could flit from flower to flower. Everyone rejoiced, and the swallow sang beautifully for them. He was sad, though, deep down, for he liked Thumbelina so much that he never wanted her to leave. But he knew that she would be happy. Goodbye, goodbye, called the swallow. He flew over the warm countries back to the fairyland Denmark, where he had a little nest outside the window of a man who chirped fairy tales. And the swallows sang chirp, 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 chirp to the storyteller all summer long. And that's how we know the tale of Thumbelina. And here's my little Thumbelina, Mistalina. So thank you for coming to our story time, and please come back again for another story at Little Silver Spoon Nursery. Not maybe with Mistalina, but maybe with another one of the little babies in the nursery. Thank you for watching.